creating dynamic web applications a lot easier. And when I looked at Ajax and when I talked to a lot of people over the first few years of Ajax, I realized there was a lot of problems for the Java developers and later for PHP and other developers of getting this functionality easily in an application. While Ajax is not hard per se, there are things that you can do to make it much quicker, and this was a result of that. So I'm hoping that you'll learn something from today, and I usually do a more interactive talking style, so if you have questions, it's a small groups, please feel free to ask at any time. I don't know if that's culturally acceptable. When I talk in Japan, no one will ask questions unless I ask them myself. Oh my, so what is my Mac complaining about? All right. So this seal here says jMaki. A lot of people ask me about that. We created this to have an icon or a logo for the project, and what it means, this in Japanese means maki or maku. It means to wrap. So the idea is that you're wrapping something. And what are you wrapping? There's a J here. That's for JavaScript. Now, I met the guy that created Java last year. Anyone know who that is? Yeah, James Gosling. I wanted to give him a jMaki t-shirt. You know, we have these beer bashes at Sun. And I walked up to him and I gave it to him and he's like, what's the J for? I said, JavaScript. And then he lost interest. I haven't seen him wear that shirt yet, but I'm sure that maybe he will sometime, maybe to wash his car or something. All right. So once again, I'm Greg Murray, Ajax architect at Sun Microsystems. I've been doing applications for a long time. 13 years. I started as an application developer doing applets. So I wanted to do dynamic web applications from the very beginning. I started, and you can see my work on the web. I'm more than happy to show it if you're interested. But it's a bunch of applets that interact with each other. And I kind of migrated from that, and I ended up doing the blueprints, and I didn't put that here, but I also later did servlet specification and a few other things. Back in 2005, I promoted Ajax all over Sun, ended up becoming the Ajax architect because no one else wanted to do it. So it's a great way to, title recognition, create your own title. So sometimes to do that, you've got to create a technology. So I created jMaki 2.5 years ago. jMaki as a public project is out. It's 2 years old this month. Used to be called Eye Candy. Well, thank you. Thank you. Happy birthday, jMaki. I never had a party, so maybe we should do that. What else? I'm now referred a lot of the time as the jMaki guy, which that's not a great title, but it works for me. So the goal of jMaki, as I had said right when we started, is to easily integrate Ajax capabilities into your web applications. And notice I'm not saying Java, I'm not saying JSP, I'm not saying PHP, I'm not saying, there's a lot of different types of web applications out there. We try to make it easy for all of them by providing, well, a framework that has a lot of capabilities, which I'm going to explain in a minute. So how many of you use Google Maps? Maybe I should ask that, or some type of mapping API. So what about Google Gears? Okay, what about Yahoo UI widgets? Okay, well that's more than what I expected in this audience. But if you want to use these together, you'll realize that these things, while they can work together, sometimes it takes a bit of work. And what we've tried to do with jMaki is make that really easy to integrate those best-of-breed things. So we've already talked about what jMaki is, but let's talk a little bit more in detail. Unlike a lot of the other JavaScript libraries like the Yahoo UIs and the Dojo libraries of the world, jMaki is a client-server library, meaning it has code that runs on the server and on the client. Now the reason we do this is we can make the Ajax better this way. Having server-side code, we can do things like improve the performance, remove dependencies on different scripts, write out all the things that by hand you would have had to have done yourself. So if you don't want to know about CSS and JavaScript, jMaki is something that works really well for you. If you know JavaScript and CSS, it gives you even more power because you save time and not worry about the things that are less important. You should be more worried about adding functionality to your applications about integrating different technologies in. So best of breed. We focus more on the JavaScript functionality, though we can add things like Flash and Google Gears. We can even do Java if we wanted, or even JavaFX. The idea is that JavaScript becomes the thing, and jMaki allows you to do this to drive all the interactive behavior in your application. We have an application model built in. My history, I had mentioned it briefly. I did the Java Pet Store. Anyone know what that is? A few of those people? My father is an animal doctor, a veterinarian. And the team that did that wanted to do a wine store. Now, I really like wine, but it wasn't very sexy or exciting for application developers, so we did a pet store. And that was actually my doing. I was in charge of the user interface, and it gave me a lot of power. But I'm also known as the pet store guy, but only for the UI. It was actually a team of people that did it. We'd already mentioned, here's some things that we integrate with. All the different libraries that you hear, these are all big buzzwords. We can actually be the hub where everything can interact. We have a common way of declaring things, and that's what really makes it possible. Other things people like about jMaki. We make a lot of decisions up front. You say you want a table widget, we say, okay, do you want Yahoos or Dojos? The data format's the same. It's very important. Widget libraries, it's a tag, basically, that you declare in the page. In PHP, it's a function call. And you say which widget you want, you give it the data. The data is standard, regardless of what you're using. In the case of jMaki, it's always JSON-based. We've tried to reduce the number of things you need to learn. The programming model and the interaction model is consistent, so we do everything via a publish-subscribe bus on the client. All the data transfer is in JSON. So it really is the new way of doing web applications. I'm going to show you an architecture diagram that explains that in about 2 slides. Mashup capabilities, because we do the publish-subscribe and we interact with all the libraries, this was very important from the start. So the ability to mash things up and to also bring in third-party content, meaning in this case data, is very easy in jMaki. We've got a proxy that allows for that. And the concepts behind this are the same regardless of what server technology you use. And whether you use Java or JSP version of Java or even GWT or JSP, it's the same. And as I've been saying, there's multi-server capabilities built in. All right. Well, we've already talked about this enough. I think you can get the slides and look at it. These are some other framework things that we've got. These are just core pieces, but I think it's easier to just show you something.
Question.
Yes?
So when I look at publish subscribe and I look at server side, I immediately think some sort of a push happening from the server. Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility, especially if you're using comment. And we do have a way of doing that, though most of the publish subscribe is client-centric. So the problem we ran into initially is we had all these widgets from different toolkits, or even a single toolkit, and they ended up being these little islands in the page. And it's great to have a table, or it's great to have a menu, but how do you have the menu drive the table? And that's where the publish subscribe came in. Then it came to, okay, now you've got different toolkits, and some of those toolkits even have their own publish subscribe built in. But what we wanted jMaki to be is a fully functional way to integrate everything, so we created our own bus, and it ended up becoming one of the biggest selling points of jMaki. We're very powerful in the sense of publish and subscribe. We've been doing it for a very long time, and we've actually come up with a way to do it declaratively, meaning you don't need to know JavaScript to do it, and I'm going to show that in a few minutes. And that's really made things very interesting. For the very basic cases, like a fisheye driving a tab view, it's a very common case. It can be done with a few lines of code. Now, if you're a very hardcore JavaScript developer, you can go in and write the interaction behavior yourself, and we still allow for that. But we've tried to make the 80% case very easy. I think maybe it's easier to just show you. I can go on and present forever here. I'm an engineer, so I like to build things. I created jMaki to enable me to build things. I like applications. What I'm going to show you here today is in Netbeans. I work on the Netbeans team, so of course I'm going to eat my own dog food. Hopefully my dog food won't bite me back. Sometimes these are live demos and you never know what's going to happen. We do have plugins for Eclipse. We also have ANT support. So if you want to use jMaki, you're not tied to just NetBeans. I used to work in the Glassfish organization. We run on the Glassfish server very well. So you're happy to use that, but it also works on Tomcat, WebLogic, or any other JSP 2.4 or better servlet container. Right, maybe I should say servlet at 2.2. All these numbers. All right. So if I want to do a simple jMaki greenfield project, and jMaki doesn't require you to create something new, you can add it to your existing projects. I can go in NetBeans. And first of all, if you don't have it, in NetBeans 6.1, you'll need to go into the plugin manager and download it. I've already got it installed, so I don't need to do this. Installed. And jMaki is listed here. So what we're working on in NetBeans for the future versions, you'll actually have jMaki built in to NetBeans. But for the 6.1 up until 6.1, you'll need to get the plugin. And it's the first one on the list. So being Ajax, it was nice because it starts with an A. Alphabetically, we got to the top of the list. All right. So here's an application. Start out brand new. On Glassfish. The layouts have not changed. We also plan to make these layouts part of core NetBeans because we found that a lot of people like this feature where you can choose a layout. We want to make this extendable so that other people can actually change it themselves as well. Also, our layouts are a little old, so we want to be able to update these. Let me bring this up. So we'll do a 2-column. I like this one because it gives me lots of places to put things. Cross our fingers, because whenever I do a demo, things seem to break. Come on, big money, big money. I still have a spinning cursor, which worries me, but let's see if it'll open this up for me. Error message, not good. I'm going to create a new one just in case something bad happened. Web application. I will take the standard view this time and cross my fingers. All right. It's not what I wanted, but that's all right. First is a starting point. When we started doing this plugin, we realized we didn't like the default templates that came with NetBeans. It was just a blank old page, and we wanted something with a little more structure, so we did is we provided these HTML templates that have things that are in standard CSS. Now, the job of jMaki from this point is to fill in the blanks. So in this case, you've got 2 different areas, plus potentially here where you can drop a menu. And let's do that really quick here. If you haven't seen the new widgets in jMaki, we've got a lot of neat stuff. And what I'm going to show you is some of the newest stuff I've never successfully, actually not, I wouldn't say that, I've never demoed this in public. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. And I'm going to take from, over on the side here, we've got a code snippet, and I'm going to drop it in the page. And what jMaki is going to do, this is a little menu widget, and it's got data set in it, so we have defaults out of the box. And this has got some declarative publish and subscribe in it. You can get this today if you download NetBeans 6.1, so if you want to see it, it's also, there's a link in the slides for this. So the new model is I'm able to now upload or update my page without doing a page refresh, and now I've got a dynamic menu at the top there. It has a few different things. One of them is a configure reset. What this does is it basically publishes an event to another widget, which I haven't added to the page to tell it to reset itself. So now what I can do is in the main area, drop in my new favorite widget. It's called a web top, and it has a lot of the data pre-configured. All this yellow stuff right here is the data for it. So I've basically taken the parts of the page I don't like, and I've replaced it with things that I want. So let me do a reset on this just to make sure things work like I'd expect. And now I've got a set of widgets that are actually driven from the page. So if I want a little tag cloud, I can drop a tag cloud in here. One of the new widgets we've added, notice the themes. If you've used jMaki before, you probably have not seen this. And I've got another action here that's happening that's bringing up the widget console. This data is loaded from the United States. We talked about Flickr this morning, and this is what it is. Come on, Flickr, it's loading. Okay, there we go. So here's some different widgets from that are tagged with my name on Flickr, and I can go through and change the properties. So say I wanted to see my cat pictures. My cat is tagged on Flickr as the KT. So I'm able to go in and look up those pictures. And notice I'm actually doing a lot of the work in the browser. So this is where a lot of things are going. The iGoogles, the NetVibes, a lot of the different people are allowing you to do more inside the browser itself. So we've made widgets that you can actually use. You still develop your widgets in Netbeans, but as a deployment vehicle, you can actually use the browser itself. And this is our new Flow widget. So it's like a Flow, if you've ever used any of Apple's products. It's all done in JavaScript, including the reflections. I've also wired, I think I've wired this, so, oh, this version doesn't have it wired, but I can change this to be set tag here. Widget descriptions I'm going through, and what I'm going to do, if I'm successful, is I'm going to wire one widget to talk to the other. So I'm going to change it, or I'm going to actually add a publish to this. jMaki. So what will happen is when I publish, actually, sorry. I want to do that on the tag cloud and not the other. Oh, it's already publishing. So image viewer publish already. This should already work. Maybe it was show tag. If in doubt, look at the source code. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how jMaki application is built. Everything gets put under a resources directory. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the web top widget that I'm actually looking at. Now, if I was really good, I'd actually just go to the documentation, but I'm more ambitious than that. I want to actually just try to do it without. My mom always got on me because I never read the instructions. And it always seems to be a problem. So I'm going to look inside the Flow widget. A widget in jMaki, as you saw right as I moved out of the slide presentation, is made up of 3 files. Component.js, component.htm, and component.css. What I'm going to look at right now is I'm actually going to go into the component.js, and I'm going to find out what functions it's using to basically load the tags. And it's called load tags right here, plural, and the publish is load tags. So that's probably the reason why it wasn't working. I need to copy this load tags here. Now when I go here, I had load tag. So now I'll change that to load tags. If all things go well, there it went. The publish went through correctly. And yes, I should have gone to the documentation, but it was funner to do this because now you learned all about how jMaki works internally. What happened is when I click on this tag, it published a message to the load tags function on Image Viewer, and it loaded all the tags with jMaki from Flickr. And you as a developer, all you had to know, or all you had to do was change this to load tags. And when we finish and actually release this, this page will show you the different functions you'll need to do. So the documentation we haven't pulled into this environment yet. All right. So that's WebTop. It's a widget, or actually a combination of two widgets. Very fun to use. Resizable. Still needs work. But you get the general idea. Has anyone seen WebTop before? No? All right. That's good. It's a new thing for everyone. So if you want to see more examples of the WebTop, jmaki.com, WebTop. And there will be a link at the end to this as well. This is just a way that we deploy jMaki widgets. When you go to the page for the first time, it will load a set of popular jMaki things. You'll see the example I had right there with the Flickr tag cloud that's pre-configured. This is a pre-deployed version of WebTop, meaning it's hosted on a website with MySQL backing it. What you saw was me developing in Netbeans, and it was using Google Gears, and that's what it uses by default. So this is my wedding, and it has a little map down here, and it has, I'm actually going to build this for you in a few minutes. But the idea is you click on a tag, it'll show the images here, and it'll show you on the map something that happened. So, any of you ever been married in Japan? No? No. Kind of looks like this. Well, this is not the marriage ceremony, but you dress up in a kimono. This is me last fall trying on the kimono. So what we've set up this widget to do is when I click on the image, it'll take me to Flickr and show me the actual picture. So this is me last fall. And the reason I'm smiling is because I didn't pay for the wedding at that point. That's why today you look at me and I'm like, we had our wedding 2 months ago. So what I'm going to show you today is we'll build an application that will actually show real media from that event. So we've added things like a Flash player, and we've also upgraded the Google Maps and done some other things with the widgets. So it's really exciting stuff, and it's fun that I can actually bring that home. That's my wife right there. Notice she's actually got a bigger smile on her face now. You know, she's got me, and there's nothing I can do about it. All right, so I never could figure out how to jump to the right slide there. All right, so you pretty much saw the widget model when I went through to find out the topic name. But you know, a widget is basically 3 files. You don't even need the CSS file, but I like to put this here because I think design is very important. And what tends to happen is when you build sets of widgets, this gets aggregated into a single file that's called a theme, and that applies to more than one widget. But some things like Google Maps or even the Ajax search from Google, they actually provide the CSS for it. So there's, you know, this piece doesn't come there. You just have these two. This is just a template. Usually it's a div. Sometimes it's a little more. And this is the JavaScript, and you saw some of that already. If you're going to do a hello world in jMaki, this is what it would look like. You'd have a single component.htm with a div in it. You'd have a widget, and this is a widget right here. And basically it's just a namespace JavaScript object. And you create a function which ends up being the constructor for it, and inside of it you're going to do something. This is a real widget. It'll really work, and it works in JSP. If I had more time, I'd show it to you. But given that there's a lot I want to show you today, I think it's better we don't. But what I like about jMaki, I can do this all on a single page. We really tried to keep the widget model simple. With jMaki data, the things that you feed into the widgets, the biggest common question we get is, you know, how do I get my data in there? There's 2 ways. First, there's values. Second, there's services. A value is loaded immediately. So when you create the widget, it's got the data, it uses it to render itself. A service uses an Ajax request to go back to the server and get the data. Example. Oh my, let's see if I can do this without. If I go back here, all right. I'm trying to trick PowerPoint into not making me go back to that slide. Let's see what happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the web top out of the application that we had. It's my favorite, application. I love web top, but we've got other stuff we want to create today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in another widget. I'm going to take one from Yahoo this time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look on here for the Yahoo widgets, and I'm going to take a data table widget. Very common widget. Notice that it's pre-configured with some data. This is a value. The reason we do this is for simple cases, you don't really need it to go out and make a second call to get data. But the other thing is we wanted you to be able to see something really fast. So we're hoping that you can read this and say, hey, these are columns, the column names, and these are the rows. The thing I love about JSON, and this is the format, this is actually an object literal in JavaScript, but just consider it's JSON for all intents and purposes that it is. Very easy to read, very easy to work with. And I like it also because it's self-describing. So you might notice that when I'm doing this, I'm not redeploying the application. I'm just hitting page reload every time. One of the nice things about Netbeans, Eclipse, we've tried to do this, but it's not as seamless. When I drop it in the page, it's right there. So say I want to do something interesting. Let's pull in my blog, or let's pull in the jMaki blog. What I want to do is go out and get the data from jmaki.com. We've got this pre-wired for you through our proxy. So in Ajax, you can't talk to something, you can't directly talk to something that's in a different domain. There are tricks in JavaScript to get around that, and I'll show some of those. But in general, just consider that you can't. So what we put in jMaki was a proxy. And that proxy is called the Xml Http Proxy. There's documentation on it if you're looking for it. What I'm going to show you right now is the configuration file. Oops, that's the glue. And what we have in the configuration file are a preset of services. We have Yahoo Weather, Yahoo Spelling. A few of these are just RESTful services, but then you've got RSS on the bottom here. So by default, if I use something with the ID of RSS, it's going to go out. It's going to go out to this feed, which is Ludo's blog. It's going to then apply this style sheet to it. And this style sheet is set up to reformat XML into JSON. We take all the normal RSS types, the ones, the twos, the atom feeds, and they all come back in a very standard set of JSON. So all I need to do in jMaki, because this is pre-configured, is type in XHP. If you're in PHP, it's Xml Http Proxy.php, but I like servlets because we can name things shorter. You give it the ID and RSS. And my browser is not set up to display RSS, so I will have to save it to the disk and then open it. But it's going to look kind of like this. And basically it's just a channel name and a set of different items that come into it. So if you can read, data type is jMaki RSS. This is done by our XSLT style sheet, has all this information in it. And basically it's just a set of, in this case, blog feeds. But what I really want to do is I don't want to view this, I want to view it in a widget. So what we can do is from our IDE, we can go back in, and instead of saying value, we say service. So we want to go out and make another request to something that's not in this page. It's going to do an Ajax request to do it. XHP, and just like I did above, ID equals RSS. So we're going to take that feed and we're going to load it right into a table and cross our fingers because sometimes you never know. I'm also going to take off the static height because it's going to probably be bigger than what we had there. So, the other nice things is I don't have to, let's hope it's actually going out and doing the request here. Oh, it's still going out, okay. Sometimes there's a time lapse. But there you go. It's my feed in a table. It really was that easy. The only thing that scared me for a second there was it took a second to call back to the US. Our server's running in Detroit, so you never know. But you can always look at Firebug and see how the data gets loaded in. Fun stuff, right? So, yeah.
So what parts on the server?
So the proxy that goes out and gets your data is a HTTP client, and it pretends it's a browser, and it'll call out to the RSS feed, get that data, and then feed it to an XSLT processor that created the JSON that we saw here.
Proxy for different platforms.
Yes, we write the proxy for the different. So there's the same type of thing in PHP. We still don't have one in Ruby, mainly because they don't have a good XSLT processor, but we're looking at doing it anyway, just because we can probably get one in Java. What technology do you work with?
A lot of Java and PHP.
Java and PHP, we're completely covered. So jMaki.com runs, it's the PHP version of jMaki that we actually use for that site. It's the same widget, actually, which is kind of interesting. So, jMaki.com. This page is actually built using the RSS feed getter is actually done by our feed reader widget. That's in the middle there. We have a widget that's actually made for RSS feeds, and it's called feed reader or block list if you want to use the more default one. And basically it reads that content in here using an Ajax request. This is our accordion view. This is not a menu yet, but we might make it into one in the future. But we're really trying to use our own stuff, and we've learned a lot from deploying it on a site that's on the other side of the U.S. For us, that's over 2,000 miles away, which provides some nice latency for us.
So in the beginning, you mentioned that there's some. It's different because there's something on the server. Except for the proxy, there's something else.
The proxy is the big thing that we started with. So the other server-side component we're going to talk about in, I think, about 3 or 4 slides. It's our Ajax performance enhancer, which we're calling jMaki Ape. Trying to get a good term. I like to start with names and then try to invent the technology. Go figure. So is it all right if I answer that in a few slides?
Sure.
Okay, so.
Does the proxy also allow you to post content to the...
Yes, it can post, so it can do all the RESTful style things too. The proxy, it does post well, though I still need to work in the puts and the deletes. So it's a known thing. We do work, and I'm going to show in my next presentation how to work with JAX-RS. RESTful services are very important to us, but the get and the post, no problem. It's the put and the deletes right now that going through the proxy need some work. We also do authenticated sessions, so if you're proxy, you need to actually have a basic authentication. We provide for that as well. We can also pass through some other user tokens or whatever you want, actually. We have the ability in JavaScript to actually tell things that it wants to pass through. So very well set up. We're using a couple products of which I can't talk about yet, but there are things that Sun's using, and there are also some things we're working with a company called JACB that actually use this heavily. If you saw any of you go to Java 1, maybe I should ask that. No Java 1ers? There was a new social networking platform booth. It's a project that Sun's doing, and they're using, they're actually using the proxy component more than anything of jMaki. They like the widgets too, but what can you say? I already showed you a menu. This is a nicely formatted version of that. I talked earlier about being able to do declarative actions, the publish subscribe. This is what it is. You say action here, you tell it the topic to publish to, and you give it a message. But notice there's no, this is JavaScript object notation in a sense, but it's not really, having to write script. Here's something a little bit more advanced. That was a table. We saw one of those. And I already showed you, how to go from the service and load data in there. We've talked about this enough. I just showed you what the actions were. The programmatic is pretty easy to do too. It's just a simple JavaScript function. It looks kind of like this. So you create a subscriber. So like on the web top, you can have wildcards. Anything that starts with jMaki web top save. I can basically get a handle on the widget and then save the data. Other things. I publish to save. I can then set some data to it. It's pretty. It's just. How many of you have done publish subscribe on the server? Maybe I should ask that. A little. It's very similar to that. We haven't had many complaints, though conceptually it is something new because it's running in the page, and you just have to remember that.
Right. Does that have any sort of performance?
Depends on if you have more than...
Too much processing on the page.
So we have some performance tests, and it doesn't, until you have more than 400 subscribers, you really don't, it's still sub 0.3 seconds. So the more widgets you have on the page, the more potential there is for slowing it down. But we're only seeing pages, I mean, the most I've seen is 25 widgets. But each one of those could have 4 subscribers, so you're at nearly 100 there. But still, even in a rough case, we haven't had any complaints yet, though we do watch that as far as the performance goes. So, yeah, there's different ways internally that we're trying to optimize that using regular expressions or not, or just the plain old wildcards. All right, let me do a time check here. So we've still got half an hour, good. Okay. All right, what happened to my present? Oh, there we go. So I already showed a few of the models. Tables, grids, charts. The CRUD. So basically this slide shows, and I can show this to you with a table, or I can show it in a chart depending on your preference, how I use publish and subscribe actually to drive the data in a widget. Any preferences? Does anyone want to see me do this with a table or a chart? Chart's more difficult. So more difficult in the sense that I have to load the charting API. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the data table, and I'm going to get the jMaki charts. What is that? Okay, I can't even read that. So I don't have the charting widgets loaded, so what you do in jMaki to load external functionality, and these widgets exist at jmakicharting.dev.java.net. It's also linked to from the top jMaki project. I'm going to load new widgets into the palette. Now the reason this is important to you is you might have your own widgets, or you might want to take a set of these widgets and create your own palette. You might want to do this because you might want to pre-configure the templates to be wired to your data. In this case, I'm just loading a generic set of widgets, and I've got these on my desktop. I downloaded them before just in case we had connectivity problems, and they're called jMaki charting widgets. And what it's doing is it's going to load these in and it's going to add them to the palette so I can use them from any web application inside of Netbeans. And here they are at the bottom. I have an area chart, a bar chart, line chart, pie chart. Any preferences? You want to see bar chart, line chart, area chart? Come on, guys. It's got to be interactive. You've got to know this is real. Pie chart? The most difficult chart of all. But that's all right because we all love pie charts. Just like everything else in jMaki, you'll notice that this has a model and it looks like a chart. It's got a set of X and Y axis and a set of data. So I'm still on the same page. I'm going to hit a reload on this. And then we've got a little pie chart. Now the reason it's so small is it's sizing to fit the container we put it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a bigger container. Let me also take off this title thing because it looks ugly. There we go. We like it? Yes? No? Okay. I don't like the color of the chart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the jMaki button here, and it's going to give me the options. If you remember, this looks a lot like the options I had in the HTML view of this. It's the same UI, same data. We tried to actually duplicate the same thing so you'd have the same user experience. So I can change whether or not I have a legend, the padding, I can give it a static size. I can do a lot of different things with this thing, and I can also specify the data right there inside this viewer. The usage is something we still need to do more on. This would contain more information on the publish and subscribe topics in the future. So what I want to do is I want to change the color scheme, and I want a red chart instead. So I'm going to click on that, and what it did for me is it should have actually added a 1 here. Without knowing the APIs, it should change that for me. So I've got a red chart. What we want to do is we want to change the data in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a driver for this. Something's got to publish something for the chart to be modified by. So we have the side content bar here, and I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to use a Yahoo button. There's the Yahoo button. It says click me. So I'm going to hit a page reload. You also notice that I'm reloading the page every time. It's very iterative when you do this Ajax style development. And we haven't done anything with the on-click yet. Out of the box, we have this glue.js file. And what it has in it is it has a few different events, and it's actually wired to receive the on-click event. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an alert so that when the button is pressed, this subscriber that subscribes to anything on-click and the button publishes to on-click, it's going to publish an alert message that says it was pressed. So I'm going to hit a page reload here, and then when I click here, it says the button was pressed. So now what I want to do is instead of say the button is pressed, I want to change the charting data. So what I'm going to do, this is called the programmatic approach because usually this kind of thing you don't want to do. You don't want to do it declaratively. It gets very hard to read. But I'm going to set the data set to something different. All right. So here's my new data set. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change 65, 30. I'm going to change a few values in that. Then I'm going to say jMaki, publish. I believe I've got everything mapped to a topic called charts. Or maybe it's just chart. I can also use jMaki pie chart. Or I think it's just pie. And then I have to tell it to do something. I'll just say add data set. I think set data set also works, but let's just double check that this works. My data. All right. Let's do a little verification. So I'm going to go into jMaki charting, which means that I'm going to have to say jMaki charting pie add data set. So here's the jMaki charting pie chart. I'm just verifying I have the right topic name. So let's double check here. jMaki charting pie chart is the publish, if you read right here. And the subscriber is update data set. So I'm going to change it to that just so it'll work. Yeah. I think they both do the same thing, but I just want to make sure that I update is the proper thing because it's already existing. I think if it's already got a chart, it'll actually, the add will cause it to update, but rather than try to figure that out, trial and error, it's easier to just do this. All right. So there you go. So let me do a second button just so you can see what happened there. So I'm going to copy this data I had here, and I'm going to create a new topic called foo. Doesn't matter what it is. Foo on click, and I'm going to change this to 165 and 95 just so we can see that there's a difference. At which point I need to add one more button. And I need to add another property here, publish equals foo. So now the idea behind this is it will now publish to the new topic, with the second button. So 1, 2, pretty easy. Usually these things break, so you're seeing a very good day for my laptop. Nothing has gone completely wrong, but normally this is a pretty complicated thing. If you've ever done charts, usually this is a couple server round trips, a lot of data on the server, but really this can be completely driven from data that comes from the server but it's on the client. In this case, the data is JSON based. All right. Yes?
How do you build a widget yourself? Do you have server-side code for each widget?
What's that?
How do you build a widget, custom widget?
So the custom widget, there's a couple ways you can do it. Now, about 5 slides back, I had a Hello World widget. You can start with that as a starting point, but generally what I do is I look for a widget that does kind of what I want to do, and then I take it and I rename the directory and then I modify it. That's the easiest way to do it. And we've got all the major libraries covered. The one that you don't see right off the bat is ext.js. There are licensing problems with the latest release that you really can't bundle it with anything. So we actually have wrappers for the older version. So, you know, we still have Yahoo and we have Dojo. We have jQuery, but it's only in our workspace right now. And also, we're going to have some new widgets that are going to come from Sun that will be out pretty soon too.
One basic question. How does this fit into JSF?
So in JSF, basically it's the exact same interaction model. You've seen JSP from this point. So what I can do here, so jMaki, all widgets are exposed either in JSP or JSF in the exact same way. So what I can do here is I can add 2 frameworks, Java server faces, and the program model is exactly the same. And that was the point behind it. I wanted to do JSF a lot easier. This is a JSF template here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag in, just so you can see, I'll take in a Yahoo calendar and I'm going to drop it under the view. And notice it's the same widget tag, the same description. The only difference is that up here, instead of saying JSP, you change that to JSF. We can bind to value-bound expressions, so we can bind to things that are in managed beans. What else can we do? We have the ability to read things right out of the jar file in JSF. So you can actually package your widgets inside a jar file and share it that way. But you can still have this nice development cycle where I'm going through iteratively and updating things. Once you get it to where you want, then put it in a zip file. When I was creating jMaki the initial time, we were working very closely with the JSF team, so we've made sure that these things are just as easy. So just to give you an idea, let me deploy this application and show you where we're at. Cross our fingers, right? I haven't done this in a while. Faces exception. I don't know, what did I do? Oh, I forgot to do one thing which should have happened out of the box for me. There's a secondary library that we need to add called JSF compounds, and it should have been added when I added this to the application. And there it is. Faces, All right. So I need to figure out what went wrong here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the code from my workspace and file a bug. So this is the jMaki project here, and in our shared directory we've got, at least we should have the shared. Well, I'm not going to go into this right now, but normally it's the same experience. The library that we saw there is added, but it looks like some of the APIs got changed. So we do have a document also on how to do that. I take it you're a JSF developer by default? So let me see here. So jmaki.com, samples. Actually, I don't want to go to samples. On the documentation page, if this is not here yet, it will be in the next day or so. We've got a nice document on how to integrate that. And I'm sorry it wasn't working right here. It should have. But given how many demos I do, I'm just glad that everything up until now. And there should be a JSF. Right here. So it's the second tutorial off the top. All right. I've got a few more slides, so let me run through those, and then I'll answer a few extra questions. I've got about 6-7 minutes left. All right. We've already talked about the proxy. You already have seen what it does under the covers. We have the ability, you didn't see this, this happens under the covers. This is how requests get made. An extension, basically this is anything that's not in the core jMaki, so things like Google Gears. What else do we have as extensions? Charting is actually an extension as a library. Oh, sorry. Sound History Manager. We also just added a Flash player as well. An extension looks just like a widget, so it's in the same format, same directory structure. The main difference is there's no component.html. You'd asked about this, and maybe I should cover this given that it is important. One of the biggest features we added for 1.8 is our Ajax performance enhancer. What this does is it looks at the different aspects of your application, and if you flip a switch, it'll basically improve the performance. We've seen up to 40% improvement. The more widgets you have on the page, the better the performance improvements get. Do many of you know about why slow? So these are guidelines from Yahoo on why your application doesn't load or run as quickly as you'd expect. We basically implement that set of guidelines inside of jMaki. So we make sure that your JavaScript gets loaded at the end of the page, your CSS gets loaded at the top, all the gzipping, everything in between happens correctly. The reason we can do this is jMaki knows about all the different resources in your application, and we're able to improve things and put things in, especially the headers, at the right time. This is all done through a servlet or a PHP component, and it's basically you set two properties and you're going to get this. So you're not going to use this in your normal development cycle, but once you deploy it, this is what you're going to want to set. And we have a nice document on that that I can point to later. Tooling integration, if you want to see this, come to my next talk. You've seen this development cycle many times. This is just what I've been doing. It's the recipe. You create an application, you deploy it once, you save, reload, edit, save. That's the recipe. It's just basically choose a layout, drop in a widget, configure widgets, and then integrate with the services. So you always start with a value and then you want to move it to a service. All right, I have a few more slides here, but I think it would be even more important. I wanted to show you the last aspect, since I just got married and I thought it would be really fun to see this. All right, I'll have to figure out why that didn't work later. So this is a jMaki web top that I created using that widget. It's standalone. And basically it's showing different media things that came through. Now this is a little zoomed in on the map, but this is where I got married. So the idea is that you've got a set of things that I can show my pictures, I can show Flash video, and I can do all this using the publish and subscribe. And I can also then modify locations and sizes of things. So if I had audio on this, I don't think you can hear that, but I've also... This is my video, so it's I'm not worried about copyright things. If anyone wants it, we have it on jmaki.com. So what I've done here is, let me stop the video just so you can see. The video can also be driven through publish and subscribe. So Flash has provided some APIs into it, and what we've done is we've wrapped those and we've wired them right in. And what I'm doing here is I can publish through and I can publish events to the different things. You notice the map location comes on. It's all done under the covers. A lot of this happens just out of the box. The data for this is using the declarative format in jMaki. And it's a little intense, but I just want to show you just to give you an idea of what you can do. This is a more advanced case of an application. It's still hard to read, but what it's doing here is you click on one of the widgets and it'll basically give it a set of geolocations. So you see longitude, latitude. It's publishing the ad markers, and then it's also publishing for it to select something in the tag cloud. But it's all declarative, and yes, there's a lot of it, but I wanted to show a bigger case. So my favorite one here is I click on the ceremony, and that's what basically it'll show the ceremony here, and then it will tell the Flash player to play the ceremony video.
So all that goes in comments, right? In code, in a string. So basically, the IDE's code complete and things like that. So
we're actually working on that. So my hope is for the 6.5 version of NetBeans, it'll actually do the completion there. Now, that's if you do it in line. If you actually do this as a service, you do get the full code completion and everything that comes with it. This example, all the samples are loaded as service, so I can actually load that from a file. Yeah, that is a big problem for us. The other thing that we do is we also have JSON schema that we're defining for all these different data formats, so that you can, even if the problem you get into is even if the JSON is good, sometimes it won't validate, or sometimes there'll be a problem. So JSON schema is like a DTD in XML, and it's an emerging specification, but we're using the latest and greatest, and we're actually creating a site where you can cut and paste your own JSON schema, and we also want the IDE to have the functionality to actually look at the schema and then tell you whether or not it's valid. So it's not just the code completion and the error checking. It's more than that in jMaki. And we've had that problem up until now, and we're actually working to make sure that all that data gets defined for every given widget, and also the interactions that you might do with it. So lots of different levels we can do this. So I'm being told my time's pretty much up, but this jMaki.com web top, you can see this in action. You can click on the eyes on any given one and actually see the data there. It's real fun to play with. It's yet the next generation of jMaki, but you can still take these widgets and use them in your common web apps as well. Let me just show you my last slide, and we'll summarize, and then I think they're going to kick me out. What's that? We have a couple architecture diagrams. The best one that you want to see, where is it? Let me double check. I thought I put it in this presentation, but I didn't see it today. So, jMaki home. I believe developer site, so first link. And then about jMaki has the architecture diagram right there. So they're telling me I've got 1 minute, but this is basically all the pieces working together. Now, if you stay and go to one of my other talks today, I'm going to show the bigger diagram of the bigger problem we're trying to solve with the JAX RS and how that all comes in. But these are, if you want to just know what the pieces are, this will go through, and what we've tried to do is so it'll print out in one page, describe everything that we do in one page. This still could use a lot of updating because we've added a lot to this since this diagram was created, but the core things, are still always there. So go out, look at it. We try to make things a lot easier. I know there was a lot of information today. I'm doing 3 other talks, so I'm going to talk more about the NetBeans aspects in, I believe, the next hour. And then I will have another talk on GWT later today. And then if you want to know about Java and Ajax, I'm going to be speaking tomorrow. So they're all different flavors. jMaki has a lot of different aspects, and it'll pop up in some of the other talks. So if you're interested, stop by. But thank you for all coming in. And I don't really have as much question time because we kind of went over. But I'm going to be here for the next 2 days. So pull me aside if you don't see me, or I'll try to make myself available afterwards. But I think I've got another talk. So let me double check that first. Anyways, thank you for coming.